1223. The steppes east of the Volga River. Genghis Khan does not turn back. His generals expected the order after the victory at the Kalka River. Return east, consolidate the empire. Let the Western campaign end as a raid rather than a conquest. Every previous Mongol incursion into unfamiliar territory had followed this pattern. Strike, gather intelligence, withdraw. Genghis Khan gives a different order. Continue west. He is 61 years old. He has conquered more territory than any human being in history, and he has no intention of stopping while he can still sit a horse. The campaign against Khwarezm is finished. The Russian principalities lie disorganized and fighting each other. There is no unified force between the Mongol army and the heart of Europe. Subutai, the greatest general in Mongol history, does not need to be convinced twice. The army turns north into the Russian forest lands. Ryazan is the first principality to receive the demand for submission. Ryazan refuses. The city falls in 5 days. Every Mongol siege follows the same brutal logic. Cities that surrender immediately are absorbed with minimal destruction. Cities that resist are made into examples so complete that the next city on the list surrenders without a fight. Vladimir falls next, then Suzdal, then Moscow, still a minor fortress town, not yet a capital of anything. Prince Yuri of Vladimir gathers every soldier he can summon and meets the Mongols on the Site River in the deep winter of 1224. It is not a battle. It is an annihilation. The Russian force is surrounded and destroyed in a single morning. Yuri dies on the field. Novgorod in the north is spared only because the spring thaw turns the approach roads into impassable swamp. Subutai does not waste men on terrain that will trap them. The city survives by geography alone. By 1225, every major Russian principality south of Novgorod has submitted or been destroyed. Genghis Khan does something no Mongol ruler has done before. He does not return to Mongolia. He establishes a winter camp on the Volga and begins planning the next campaign before the current one has finished consolidating. Kiev is the last major Russian city standing. It falls in 1226. Its cathedral bells melted down for Mongol coinage, its princes paraded before Genghis Khan's tent and executed beneath a wooden platform in the traditional Mongol method reserved for enemy royalty. Bloodless, so as not to spill the blood of nobility onto the earth. The road to Europe is now completely open. Hungary and Poland receive refugees fleeing the collapse of Kievan Rus. King Bela IV of Hungary hears the stories and does not believe the scale of what is coming. No kingdom in Europe has fought an army like this. No kingdom in Europe has a king willing to unify against a threat most consider a distant rumor from the steppes. Genghis Khan crosses the Carpathian Mountains in the winter of 1227, when the rivers freeze solid and become highways for cavalry instead of barriers.
Here is where history gets complicated. Rome in 319 BC is not the Rome of Caesar. It is not yet an empire. It is a republic, aggressive, expanding, but still fighting its neighbors in central Italy. Still building. Alexander crosses into Sicily. His scouts reach southern Italy. The Roman Senate debates what to do. Some senators want to negotiate, send ambassadors, offer alliance. Others understand what is happening. Alexander does not make allies. He makes subjects. The Roman legions march south to meet him. The battle happens outside of Naples. In 317 BC, Roman legions against Macedonian phalanx. Two military systems that never met in our timeline. It is closer than anyone expects. Roman discipline against Macedonian depth. The legions hold for 6 hours. Then Alexander's cavalry hits the flank. The same move he used at Gaugamela. The same move he has used 100 times. The Roman line breaks. Rome does not fall. it bends. Alexander does not destroy Rome. This is his genius and his pattern. He absorbed Persia. He adopted Egyptian religion. He married a Bactrian princess. He understands that you cannot govern a world empire with a Macedonian army alone. Rome is allowed to keep its senate, its laws, its culture. But Rome now pays tribute to Babylon. Roman legions now fight under Macedonian command. Rome's enormous administrative talent, the thing that will eventually build an empire of its own in our timeline, is now working for Alexander. It is the most consequential alliance in history. West and East. By 312 BC, 20 years after he should have died in Babylon, Alexander controls everything from Greece to the Indus River, North Africa, Spain, the Arabian Peninsula, southern Italy. He turns east again, the Indian kingdoms beyond his old frontier. The Maurya Empire is forming. Chandragupta is consolidating power in the Ganges Valley. Alexander sends ambassadors first. He has learned patience. The negotiations fail. His army crosses the Indus in 309 BC. The same soldiers who had refused to go further 20 years earlier, their sons now march east. A new generation, born into an empire, knowing nothing else. The campaign takes 4 years. It is the hardest fighting of Alexander's life. Jungle, monsoon, elephants in numbers he has never faced before. But Alexander is still Alexander. By 305 BC, the Maurya frontier has broken.
Duke Henry II of Silesia gathers Polish knights, German Teutonic knights, and Templar reinforcements at Legnica. The Mongol force facing him is smaller than his own army. Henry believes this is a battle he can win. He is wrong for the same reason every European commander has been wrong. Mongol horse archers do not fight the way European heavy cavalry expects an enemy to fight. They do not close for a decisive clash of arms. They circle, they loose arrows from a full gallop, they retreat when charged and turn to fire backward from the saddle, a technique European chroniclers do not have a name for yet. Henry II dies on the field at Legnica. His head is displayed on a spear outside the city walls as a message to the rest of Poland. By the end of 1227, Hungary and Poland are broken. The road to the Holy Roman Empire itself lies open, and Frederick II's crusading army is now the only organized force standing between the Mongols and the heart of Western Europe. The winter of 1228 becomes the turning point that historians will argue about for centuries. Genghis Khan is now 66 years old. He has been on continuous campaign for nearly 2 years without returning to Mongolia, the longest sustained Western operation any Mongol force has undertaken. His generals raise concerns his father-generation commanders would never have voiced. Supply lines stretch across a continent. Horses need grazing land the German forests do not provide in the quantity the steppe does. Reinforcements from Mongolia take the better part of a year to arrive. Genghis Khan makes the decision that defines the rest of the campaign. He does not push directly into Germany's dense forests and fortified stone castles, terrain fundamentally different from the open plains where Mongol cavalry dominates. Instead, he consolidates. Hungary and Poland become permanent Mongol territory, administered by Bata Khan, while Genghis Khan establishes what will become the western capital of the Mongol Empire on the Hungarian plain itself, close enough to Europe to strike again, far enough to rest and resupply. Frederick II's crusading army waits at the Austrian border for an attack that does not come. Weeks pass. Then months. The largest army Western Europe has assembled in a century begins to fracture from its own internal tensions, German princes fighting over precedence, Italian city-states demanding to go home, the Pope and the Emperor renewing their old rivalry now that the immediate threat appears to have paused. Genghis Khan has not given up on Europe. He has done what he has done in every previous campaign, absorbed new territory, integrated new soldiers and engineers from conquered populations, and waited for the right moment to strike again with overwhelming force rather than exhaust his army against fortified positions. The moment comes in 1230.
Reinforcements arrive from the Eastern Empire. Fresh Chinese siege engineers who bring with them a critical piece of technology the Mongols lacked in the first push west. Trebuchets and gunpowder-based incendiary weapons capable of breaking German stone fortifications that had, until now, been the one thing standing between Mongol cavalry and total conquest. Vienna falls in the autumn of 1230. Frederick II's fractured coalition cannot mount a unified defense. The city that will one day be remembered as the gateway between East and West becomes a Mongol administrative center within a single season. The shock ripples across every court in Europe. France mobilizes. England, still recovering from its own internal conflicts under Henry III, sends reinforcements across the Channel for the first time in a crusade not aimed at the Holy Land. The Papal States call for every remaining Christian kingdom to send soldiers or funds. Genghis Khan, now 68, does not live to see the next campaign season. He dies in the winter of 1230 in the captured palace at Vienna of causes his physicians describe only as the failing of an old body that has spent decades at war. Unlike history's actual timeline, there is no succession crisis. His chosen heir and the Western commander who has fought beside him for the entire European campaign are already in place with the army, the administration, and the momentum already established. The Mongol Empire does not pause to fight over the throne. The machine simply continues.
WHATIF Khan inherits command of the Western Front exactly as it stands, an empire that stretches from the Pacific coast of China to the gates of Bavaria, with no internal rival strong enough to challenge the succession that Genghis Khan arranged years in advance. France and the remaining German states form the last major defensive coalition Western Europe will assemble. It gathers at the Rhine in the spring of 1231, built from the wreckage of Frederick's earlier crusade, reinforced by English longbowmen and French heavy cavalry, the two most effective military forces Western Europe has left. The Battle of the Rhine becomes the single bloodiest engagement Europe has ever recorded. Mongol horse archers meet a defensive line anchored on a river crossing for the first time, and the terrain finally works against them the way it worked against every army that faced them in the open field. English longbows cut down cavalry charges at a range Mongol composite bows cannot match. French knights, fighting on home ground with clear supply lines for the first time in this war, hold the crossing for 3 days. WHATIF Khan withdraws east of the Rhine. It is the first clear defeat the Mongol Empire has suffered in over a decade of continuous Western expansion. The war does not end in a single dramatic peace. It ends the way most wars against an empire of this scale eventually end: exhaustion on both sides, a border that stabilizes roughly along the Rhine and the Alps, and a Mongol Europe that now includes Russia, Hungary, Poland, and Austria as permanent territories governed under Mongol administration for the next century. Western Europe survives, but transformed. France and the German states build the first standing professional armies in European history specifically because the memory of Mongol cavalry never fades from institutional memory. The longbow becomes the signature weapon of European warfare a full century earlier than in the world we know, refined specifically to counter horse archers rather than French knights. Eastern Europe becomes something unrecognizable, a Mongol-administered zone stretching from the Volga to the Danube, Russian princes ruling as vassals for generations, Hungarian and Polish nobility either destroyed or absorbed into a new ruling class that answers to Karakorum. The empire that Genghis Khan refused to abandon in 1223 becomes the largest contiguous empire that will ever exist on Earth, and it does not fracture the way it did in the world we know, because the man who built it lived just long enough to make sure his death would not be its undoing. Europe spends the next 3 centuries defined by a border it never chose and an enemy it never fully defeated. What do you think? Could Western Europe have actually held the Rhine, or would the Mongol Empire have eventually broken through completely? Drop your answer below. Next scenario: what if Rome never fell? That one is coming. Subscribe so you don't miss it.